Hey all, and welcome to today's lecture. So today we're going to be focusing on Agile methodology and Scrum framework. So basically what it's going to boil down to is going to be how to manage your project. You should have had some of this in a lower level class with project management or in some of your group projects. Hopefully some of the other professors have done a little bit of project planning with you. But we're going to go ahead and apply that towards our entire group project as we. This is just the mark. So in today, we're going to focus on Agile methodology fundamentals, Scrum, scope, stakeholders, project visions, and user stories. All everyone's team should be formed. You should be starting your contracts and getting your initial project ideas brewing. I will be creating your GitHub repositories for your project. So I will be creating a GitHub classroom and set the lookout for that from your email perspective. That's why I needed all of your GitHub username so that I can send you that. So why are we doing Agile? We're doing Agile because some of the older, more tried and true methods, for example, like Waterfall has very big challenges for today's IT enterprise, for today's large IT and smaller enterprises. The reason for that is Waterfall is usually the method in which you kind of start at the beginning, you get your project requirements, and then you go off and you build a complete project and bring back a complete project. At that point in time, the requirements could have changed. What the customer thought they were getting could have been completely different. And by customer, I mean either your boss, your peers, or a legitimate customer that you're selling this to. And so Waterfall had a lot of risk of building the wrong solution. And then when you build the wrong solution or they want to add something or remove something, then you kind of have to set back everything for best case a week or two, worst case several years. Think about some of the games that are being developed that get back 2-3 years because of changes or upgrades that need to happen to the chain. So agile, because technology changes quickly. We need stuff to be able to move fluidly as stuff changes. So for agile, what does it do? It's individuals and interactions. You work on incremental pieces of working software. So you don't do the entire application all at once. You build smaller pieces. Those smaller pieces together, kind of a Lego set until you have the completed project. And you kind of it gives you the ability to respond over time to any changes that you made. So let's say that this week you're doing something and you decided your project was going to be on C sharp. You get one sprint into it. Sprint. You get one sprint into it. And within that end of that one sprint, you realize that C sharp doesn't have what you need and you really need to be going with TypeScript. Well, you didn't make it to the very end to figure that out. You've only lost one sprint's worth of time. You haven't lost 3 months, 6 months, a year worth of time to then come back and pivot. So with Agile, you have to be ready to make a change if a change. So again, you focus on working demos over perfect documentation. Scrolling. All right, so Agile principles for student teams. You want to satisfy the consumer, being ultimately the end user of your product. And well, no, that's custom. All right, we'll go with that one. You should be welcome to changing requirements. So they're going to change because you may realize that you wanted a carousel and now you don't need a carousel. You need something different. You're going to deliver working software frequently. Is it always going to be working at the end of the sprint? No, but you need to deliver changes frequently. We're going to be doing 2-week sprints. A sprint is just a block of time for work. It's nothing fancy, it's just a block of time. So it can be 1 week, it can be 2 weeks, it could be a month. We're going to be working on 2-week sprints. So, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but it'll be the beginning of the 2 weeks, you'll basically divide the tasks among yourselves, and then at the end of the 2 weeks, you guys will come together, do demos. It does not have to be a complete working project at the demo submission. It just has to show progress. Anything that is working, you should show that. It could be that there's a button that now works. Complete application, but it's a button. You guys decided that you do that. Sprint. Very important thing about Agile is that business and developers both work together. You build projects around motivated individuals, so you want people that are going to want to finish the task. Don't necessarily want it to keep going and dragging on, because then it's just going to be assigned to someone else. And in the world of IT, that will probably be placed in a future job. You have face-to-face conversation. Obviously, in this class, that's going to be a little bit difficult because we're all online. So it might be that you guys set up a meeting and you guys attend a meeting and meet virtually. You guys might meet asynchronously and just provide updates on what you're doing. The meeting synchronously, even if you do it online, set up a Google Meet, or you guys set up a Skype, whatever it is that you. End result is going to be working software. You want to make sure that you don't front load or back load all of your planning. So you don't want all of the heavy stuff to be on one specific sprint, or all of the heavy stuff to be at the beginning of your whole project plan or whole project plan. Developers, you as developers are to say, hey, this is what I think I can manage this sprint. Obviously, even with saying that, there might still need to be a little bit of extra that gets to you. The reason being is just because if we only say, hey, I can only handle a button, I can only handle a checkbox next time, then by the time the 6-7 sprints that we're going to have are done, you might only have 6 pieces of form and you don't have a complete form. So there has to be a give and take between the developer and business, developer and the product owner, so that you guys can plan, this is what we need to get done this sprint. What can everybody do? Simplicity. Don't over engineer whatever it is that you're doing. So you don't want to make it the fanciest thing possible. So if somebody asks you to build a car, for example, you don't start by saying, I'm going to tackle a vehicle and I'm going to make it. You start with, I am going to figure out how to get something to move. You might start with 2 wheels. You might start with a scooter. And I'm going to figure out how to make a scooter move, electric or gas power. And then you move on to like a go-kart, and then you regular car, and eventually over your iterations you end up at that hypercar. But you don't start at, we're going to do the best thing and the greatest thing. You guys are going to be self-organized as far as who is doing what. I am not going to dictate this person needs to do this or this needs to do that, but you guys do need to rotate. In the rotating, you might find that somebody is better at project planning and great at developing. Another person is great at developing, but not so great at database. And that is fine. But you guys do need to take some turns trying out every item, because I don't really know exactly what it is you want to do after you graduate, but this will at least give you a chance to put in your portfolio that you've managed a small team using Agile, Scrum, also see the project that you've done. Reflection and adjustments, the retrospectives, that's just basically going back and saying, we had that sprint last week. and we just need to figure out what went wrong, what went well. If everything went well, great. If something went wrong, talk about it. Figure out how you can address it and then move on from that. You are not going to have every sprint go perfectly every time. It's just not. It doesn't work that way. Or see it work. All right. So the overview. You have your sprint planning, which is basically just your get together, where you will take all of your user stories, and we'll get to what that is, and kind of define what it is that your user stories are going to be, what it is that your tasks are, and what it is that you're going to do within that sprint. You do your sprint for 2 weeks, then you have a sprint review at the end of the 2 weeks, and a retrospective after your. Within this review and retrospective time, you can either do it right before your review. I would probably do it right after your review. And you could do it technically after your retrospective because that depends on how your cadence of your meetings are, is where you would kind of do your demo. And your demo is just going to be a simple presentation on YouTube where you're basically telling me what you've worked on and what it is that you're going to do essentially. Your daily stand ups, we'll get to this, but your daily stand ups right here that you'll do within the sprint, these occur during the duration of the sprint. These are going to be your weekly, bi-weekly, semi-weekly check-in meetings that you do with your team. You as a team are going to get together and decide we're going to meet this many times a week, or. And during those meetings is when you're going to basically tell your other teammates what you have worked on and what you have finished. If you're committing code, they will be able to see whether or not you've committed that code. Be honest with your teammates because GitHub will allow them to see, and me to see, everything that you have worked on. And if you don't commit, then we're just going to assume nothing was going to. At least that's what I would do if I were. If you get stuck, your daily stand-ups are where you would basically bring that up. But because you guys are not meeting daily, you guys need to raise a group chat with your group, however you're going to communicate, and mention, I am stuck on this. Do not wait until the next stand-up to tell your group that you're stuck. Because if you guys only meet once a week on Mondays, you get stuck on Tuesday. That means you're not doing anything for 6 days till the following Monday when you tell your group, oh yeah, I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. That is you letting your group down. And I can guarantee that from the other side of it, anybody would feel frustrated if you get stuck on a Monday, Tuesday after the meeting and you don't reach out. Everybody gets stuck. I get stuck. I have to reach out to someone. You're not going to essentially be doing anything by that. Your sprint review is going to be your working product, not your entire product, but what it is that you have done as far as the sprint. And again, sprint retro is just process improvement. So the key roles in Agile and Scrum is the product owner. It's basically the person who says, this is my product. I am going to take ownership of it. I'm the person who's generally going to run the daily stand-ups. So if we were meeting in a group of people, I would be the one that would be calling the people out, as far as not calling them out for doing or not doing their job, but calling them to share, essentially. Saying, hey, Mike, can you please share what you did this week, or not this week, but since the last stand-up, and what you plan to do between now and then. They're generally the person that's going to facilitate that aspect of it. They're also going to be the person that facilitates some of the user story, how we're going to move forward. Like what is going to be some of the tasks. The Scrum Master also does some of that. It's kind of like you're gonna find a lot of places that do Agile but don't necessarily do Scrum because there's a lot between the two. They're gonna also facilitate the process. So they might come in and they might say, "Hey, um, here's a big little bit more of a deep dive." They're going to come in and lead the retrospective. They're going to make sure that the meetings are being held. They're going to make sure that stuff is progressing within the item. Did we do the demo? Were the meetings held? Did we do a retro? What's coming from the retro? Do we need to change anything in the process? Meet more often, that kind of stuff. And again, the product owner is going to write and define user stories and ultimately accepts and rejects completed work. So if you were supposed to create a button and you accidentally created a link, well, unless you need a link also, they might reject that work and button. And then you kind of have the development team. The development team is the team that would more or less be responsible for writing. Everybody needs to do some development. All of you have had development classes. 1, 2. Everybody needs to contribute to the development project. So everybody will be in this, and everybody will also have a little bit of time on project owner, scrum master type stuff. So the scrum events, sprint planning. So you guys should devote as a group. It doesn't have to be 100% together, but as a group, you guys should devote at least about an hour to maybe 2 to plan what it is that you're going to get done for that 2-week sprint. So you want to make sure that everybody is assigned a task. Just because you're the product owner does not mean get to not do anything for those 2 weeks. You might be more focused on researching something, doing a proof of concept, something of that nature. But make sure that you are planning out your assigning tasks. Well, I will show you how to project and assign tasks. It's going to be part of your overall project as well to make sure that you are assigning tasks, closing them, progressing as you go. Your stand up, on average, with 3 to 4 people, yeah, it should be 15 minutes ish. That gives everybody enough time to talk for 2 to 3 minutes about what they did, what they're doing, and if they had any blockers. Blockers being like, I couldn't get my VS Code set up, I couldn't get connected to GitHub, I couldn't do this. Stuff that somebody can help with. The product owner is generally the person who will try to help facilitate that, but anybody in the group can help. So at least on average, 15 minutes. And again, you're going to answer the questions: what did I do? What will I do? And what's blocking me? And this goal of this is just basically to synchronize and make sure that we're completing the tasks within the sprint. The sprint review, usually about an hour. You guys can do the sprint review and retro at the same time. And again, I have demo day after demo at any given point during this. But the sprint review is just basically going over your sprint tasks. Like if I was assigned the task of creating a button, I would show it to the group, and the group would say, yes, it's done, label the ticket as done, and we keep moving on tasks that are. If for some reason it has to continue or change, then we need to figure out why within the sprint review retro. And then after sprint review and retro, you basically come right back up to the top and go back to sprint planning, where you're planning the following sprint. So at the beginning and end of sprints is where you tend to have a little bit more of that heavier time with planning and figuring out what's going to happen, what's done, and what. So go through as you guys meet, as you guys come up with your project, and do a role assignment activity. Go ahead and write down who's going to do what, who's going to do that stuff. If you're going to have product owner, who's going to be the product owner, the scrum master, and the devs. The devs, technically, the product owner and scrum master will still be devs, but just go ahead and list out the devs here. I know this says lead and QA lead. You guys you won't have a QA lead, at least not at the beginning. this might come in handy a little bit more later on in the semester. So just focus on product, Scrum, and then devs. So your product vision, what's your product going to be? So as you're trying to figure out what your product is, just kind of think about what it is that you want to build, who you want to, and come up with kind of like your vision that you guys are going to write all your user story. You're going to have your stakeholders within your project. These are just things you need to keep in mind. Who's your direct user going to be? Who's an indirect user? And who are the project stakeholders? So for here, I'm a project stakeholder because I'm going to be basically assessing your classmates, your IT department. If you guys had one, you're technically your own IT department right now. So that's you guys are each other's project stakeholders. And let's go to user story. Important piece. So a user story, just a short description of a feature from a user perspective. It's the who, what, why, and how. It's a starter, not a complete project. And you can do user stories wrong, and there's a lot of places. More importantly, user stories are testable. It means that you can test whether or not it's being. So, for example, this lists as a user, I want this functionality so that I can do this. Like as a store manager, I want to receive low stock alerts so that I can render products before running out, reorder products. So your user stories, top level story should be like, this is not a ticket that you would assign to someone. You would create tickets based off of the user story, because this is way too broad for us to just say, hey, Mike, I want you to take on this user story. From here, we would then break it apart into all the smaller pieces. Go on with. You have your card, your conversation, your confirmation. So the story itself, the discussion about the requirements and the acceptance criteria, or how to test. Good user stories, they're independent, negotiable, meaning that you can change little bits and pieces of them. So what do you consider low stock? They're valuable to the user as far as the user type. You can estimate how long it's going to take you to complete that item. They're usually small. So this is fairly big. But even if you broke this down, you would probably break it down as far as like the database. If you're writing an API, the API piece, the alerts piece, it's going to be email piece, and 4 or 5 different right there. So you would have 4 or 5 smaller tickets within this one use. And testable. So this is testable. I put something in low stock mode. Did I receive it? So examples of user stories. As a customer, I want to search products by categories. As an administrator, I want to generate sales reports so that I can track business performance. As a mobile user, I want an interface to be responsive so that I tap on my. Those are all reasonable. For examples, the system should have a database. Too broad, too not from anyone's specific perspective. Implement user authentication system. This is also too broad. And a little tech. As a user, I want a good interface. Once you have the kind of project that you want, go ahead and develop kind of like a charter. And by charter, I mean just kind of like an outline. Develop a couple of user stories. This is going to be the higher overarching story that we have. So they're high level users. and success criteria of how you would assess your higher level. So epic. This would span multiple sprints. So you can say that your overarching epic of everything is I need to finish this project. That's going to span all of your sprints. But as an example of the store manager, as a store manager, I want a comprehensive inventory management system so that I can efficiently track and manage all products. User story. As a store manager, I want to add new products to inventory so that I can track items we sell. This would be something that you do in one sprint. So this is a smaller subsection of a comprehensive inventory. And then a task, which would be the tickets that we created inside of GitHub that you assign to each other, are create a product database table, design and add the product form, implement form validation, and write unit tests. So for right now, again, we're going to focus on the epic level type stuff. And then in the sprint plannings, we'll focus on the user stories and the tasks. Take into consideration when you're planning your project technical constraints. Don't go and pick C as your programming language if only one person in your team knows. But remember, platform, database, MongoDB is preferred because MongoDB is plug in to a bunch of different options. Hosting, whether you're going to be running it locally versus cloud. If it's a web app, it's really easy to run it on cloud for free. Render.io or some other system to host it for any security authentication. You won't really get into performance a whole lot, but just take that into consideration. You don't want anything going to bog down 2 to 3 start using it. Not that 2 to 3 people will be system, but it's something you do need to think about. Are you going to need any external APIs? And remember the timeline. You have to get it done this semester. So, scope, quality, and time. Label your items as you guys are coming up with ideas as we have to have it, we should have it, we could, and out of scope. So it'd be great if you, for example, we're doing the store inventory management system and somebody said, you know what, we should have a clock in, clock out system for the employees. That's a out of scope. But if you said, hey, we should have a barcodes within the inventory management system, not just item numbers, that's going to fall more into the should have, must have. And that's going to depend on conversations within your own team on do we need them? How would we use them if we needed them? And if the answer is that how would we use them as a won't have, then you probably should have them, but it's not necessary to your project. If it's something that you have to have in order to enhance something, then sure, it's a must have. So, common risks with this technical as you guys are planning out your project. Like I said, don't pick a language that not everyone knows because something could happen and the one person that knows that language could not update something or might end up needing help. And make sure you guys are communicating frequently. Don't ghost your team. I should point out that I will grade individual contribution on the project as well. So if you do ghost your team, the only person's grade who's going to suffer is your own. Make sure that you guys are in constant check of scope. It is really easy for scope creep to happen during the sprint planning I imagine that for time estimation on sprints, you guys are probably going to find out within the first sprint or two whether or not you're able to complete the items in that you overestimated what you can get done in that time, or you will find that you end up not having enough work for that time. If you're going to have a dependency on an external service, if you're going to need an API, you need to try to do that as soon as possible. Like if you wanted to build a media player that queried Spotify for your top listened to music in last year or the last 6 months or something of that nature, then you need to go ahead and make sure that your external dependency on Spotify API is wrapped up and done by the end of sprint one, so that you have your API key, you're able to call the API, and you're able to get back data. So, how do we solve some of that? Start simple, add gradually. Again, this is a Lego project. You're going to start with little tasks and build up. You're not going to start at the top and start from the outside in. You're going to start from the inside out. You're going to start building the stuff that's core to the project and then start adding the stuff that makes it look nice. You guys have those contracts where you're basically stating how often you're going to meet, how you're going to communicate. Make sure that you're checking in. You've stated that you can meet or that you can check in at these specific times. I understand that some stuff might come up, but make sure that you let your team know if for some reason you can't meet today, but you can meet tomorrow. Sure, stuff happens. We all get it. Just make sure that you're staying communicative and that you're just ghosting. Minimum viable product. What can we? This is where you get into the must-have. This is your minimum viable product. This is the stuff that we need to make sure we have done in order for the product to receive a, essentially. Make sure you build a little buffer time at the end to make sure that your project is good to go. So you might say, hey, we need to be done by the first week of November so that you have a buffer of a couple of weeks before the end of class. And make sure you have backup plans for dependencies. So if you're going to use the Spotify API, but you can't connect to the Spotify API, make sure that there's another API that you might be able to connect to that might still be related to music, but might not necessarily be what you were hoping to. Or it might not be related to music at all. You might say that our backup plan is to do an IMDb. Just have a backup plan for any external dependencies. So before you submit your charter, make sure that you kind of have your information as far as what your product vision is going to be, the rotation of how everybody's going to work within the project, and go ahead and assign your team roles for the first sprint. And go ahead and let's start planning to start the first sprint next week. Next Monday, you guys will kick off your first sprint, and you can go ahead and start it this week if you're feeling up for it. But make sure all of that information is contained within that, as far as what kind of project you're going to do and stuff like that. That way, as you guys submit the project information, I can look through it and determine whether or not you guys need to add a little bit of complexity, remove some complexity, or need to pivot the project a little bit, and we'll do that within that first sprint while you guys are still doing your setup and kind of getting used to sprint planning. So, key takeaways from Agile is that requirements are going to change regularly. Every sprint should deliver something useful. Communication, this is the biggest key of all of this. You need to communicate with each other. Reflect and adapt. Quality is non-negotiable. You don't want to have to go back through and fix something that was done on sprint one because you guys said it's good enough in sprint one. If it's not good enough in sprint one, take that part of that task into sprint two and finish it then. Don't leave it as tech debt that you have to come back to. Agile is not about going fast, it's about going in the right direction and adapting. So, again, the activities, the Scrum role assignment, the project charter. Make sure that you guys are. If you got any questions on this, please let me know. This will also be available within CougarView as far as all this information. So it just won't necessarily just this lecture. With the project planning, we're going to end up using GitHub. So if you have not done your GitHub account, please do so. If you've already got one, that's great. Make sure that whatever GitHub username you have is a non-offensive. Again, this is going to be what you're going to be using to apply for jobs. You want it to be as non-offensive as possible. Generic. It could be your name. It could not be your name. Just keep it generic. Don't put anything. That's an easy way to turn people off from hiring. All right. So just a quick view. GitHub has projects within every repository. When we do projects, you're going to be seeing your tickets and stuff like that inside of here. So I'm just going to add a new project to this. Let's see, start from scratch. So they have team planning. This would be what I would work on. This or Kanban. And Kanban might be easy. So I'm just going to click Kanban. Kanban gives me three statuses. And basically the whole point of this is you're basically moving essentially a sticky pad or a ticket from backlog, item that hasn't been started, an item that's been picked up. In other words, when it says ready here, and you can rename these to whatever you want, this is what you've said during your sprint that you're going to commit to. These are the tickets that have been created that might not be picked up this sprint, that might be done next sprint. These are the tickets that everybody's actively working on in this sprint, or plans for this sprint. This is what's actively being worked on. And, oh, they added to just be the 3. This changed. So let me rephrase that. Hasn't been started, not a part of this sprint, is a part of this sprint, technically hasn't been started, is assigned and actively being worked on. So if I have one of the tickets, I am actively working on it if it's in this location. I am done with that ticket. I have sent it to the rest of my team to review, or I have sent it to the product owner to review the work that I've done. And then done, the product owner has taken it from review to done. Anybody can technically take the tickets down the line. But in theory, this in review to done is going to be done by your product owner or scrum master. They're going to be the ones that ultimately review and say it's done. They could tell you to push it into done status if they're not doing it themselves. But this step shouldn't happen. Nothing should go into here without it going through the sprint end review, some sort of review from the. So this will be more or less how we'll tackle this. It used to be 3, now it has 5. I can make this a little bit wider so you can see. You can technically have more views, have my items, stuff that's assigned to you. You can add items, which we'll get into that. So you can even add items down here. So this will be where you're going to create your tickets. So this is my create button for login. So I'm going to create a new issue. You're always created as a new issue, not. And this is the description of what the button is and what it should do. So this is this kind of stuff that the product owner is going to do. Say what the ticket, just quick title for the ticket, description of what the ticket should do, the test criteria for the ticket. So I should be able to click on the ticket, on the button, and fire off the login API request. You can assign it to whoever it is that's going to have to take it, who it's assigned to for the sprint. But I'll just go ahead and click create. So here it is created. You can click on it. It's going to give you the information here for it. If it's assigned to somebody, you're going to see it assigned there. See, I can assign it to myself. So this is assigned now. Everything within here has a timestamp. So I'm going to be looking at the timestamps to make sure you guys aren't doing all of this in one day. Because there's no way you're going to go from creating the tickets and planning to moving them through the item to then taking them to complete in one. That's not going to happen. That means you're not following the whole Scrum Agile process. And this is something that you're going to be doing in any IT company. It might have a slight variation on it, but this is pretty much how most of them work, especially the Fortune 500s. You can move the ticket status within here. You can technically close the issue here. You can edit the information from the item here. You can also move it here. So if I click on it again, you'll notice that it was moved. And you'll see that it says now. It says 1 minute ago, 1 minute ago. So everything can be moved all the way down to here. Once it's done, that's when technically it's marked to closed. See how it's marked to completed? I can reopen the issue. Close it as duplicate, close as not planned. I can reopen the issue if for some reason, okay, no, I don't think it's done. And I can move it back to where I'm needing to move it back to. And it puts it, once I put it back there, it marks it to complete and close. We are not deleting any issues. All right. That's going to be in a nutshell and quick overview how the ticketing process is going to go. Product owner will come in, create the tickets, and then move them through on to complete. If you've got any questions about Agile Scrum, please feel free to reach out. This is going to be due next week as far as your project charter, your project plan, essentially. And yeah, if you got any questions, just feel free to reach out. Thanks.